When you look at the great inflection points in history, you realize something interesting. They're often shaped not by abstract ideas, but by the people who build things. And in a world being reshaped by geopolitics, energy transitions, and technology, shipyards are once again strategic assets. Fincantieri sits right at that crossroads. It builds the vessels that defend nations, power global trade, and increasingly serve as floating testbeds for next generation propulsion and digital systems. So today, I'm excited to explore with the CEO of the business how an iconic Italian shipbuilder is reinventing itself for a world that suddenly needs far more of what it does. I'm Mobeen Tahir, Director of Macroeconomics and Thematic Research at Wisdom Tree, and I'm excited to speak today with the CEO of Fincantieri, Pierroberto Folgiero. Pierroberto, welcome to the show. How are you?
Very well, Mobir. Very well. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being with us and making the time. We are excited to speak about you and your business with our audience today. But before we talk about Fincantieri itself, I do want to introduce you to our audience. You've had a remarkable journey yourself through various roles in industrial transformation. What would be great to hear from you is what drew you to Fincantieri and how has your experience in digitalization and green transition shaped your leadership approach and journey so far at Fincantieri?
Thank you for this personal question. I totally take your point in the sense that there is always a mentality, there is always a posture, there is always a set of experience behind the companies. And, in particular in our business, which is a people business. So I'm very happy to talk about me on behalf of the rest of the people of Fincantieri. So Fincantieri is a people business. So I love your approach that, let's start from the person before getting into the hardware. Let's talk about the software before talking about the hardware. So I spent almost 15 years as an executive, as a CEO in the engineering and construction space. Engineering and construction is a peculiar business whereby you have to be very good in starting from the blank piece of paper, which is the engineering, and then you have to be very good in transforming what you have designed into something that is real, that is buildable, and something that is delivered at specs in due time and at a fixed price. That's what I did for living in the last 15 years. How to manage engineering, procurement, and construction of complex assets on time and on budget, which is, basically different if you compare shipbuilding, which is the Fincantieri business, with oil and gas infrastructure, which was what I used to do for the last, couple of, I would say, one decade, more than one decade. But there is a lot in common. So it looks like very different, but in reality is very similar. So when you are in the engineering and procurement business, basically you have to be very strong in your engineering legs. So your strong know-how in the technical matters is very important, is very critical, is the core of who you are, but it's not all about that. So you have to be a very good engineer, but it's not all about that. Because the most important part is your ability to manage construction sequences, your ability to manage the typical disruptions that when you build something are always there. So it looks like it's a business of engineers while it's a business of doers. It's a business of people capable to transform engineering skills into a very complex asset to be built from scratch. So I don't know how much you are familiar with the different components of, for example, a cruise ship. Let me talk for a moment of cruise ships so that then we can concentrate on defense. A cruise ship is a hull, which is very big, which is very complex, which you need to build from scratch. So it starts with kind of heavy industry capabilities. So you have to be very good in cutting the steel, welding the steel, and launching a big hull. But again, this is just the beginning. So looks like a shipbuilding exercise. In reality, you are an integrator of different systems because on top of the hull, you have to build from scratch a power plant for 60 megawatt, 60, which means a power plant of a village. Then you have to manage the waste of a community of 10,000 people inside the same hull. And then you have to manage the cycle of the water of a community of 10,000 people, meaning producing water, managing wasting waters. And then on top of it, you have to build an hotel of 20 floors, 20 decks from scratch. And then you have to procure that this big smart city is also floating according to Archimedes law. And then this ship has to go at 22 knots in perfect safety and security. So looks like you are manufacturing hull, but in reality, you are integrating a system of systems. So in the complex shipbuilding, it's a system of system exercise. Obviously, one of the systems you integrate is the hull, which is hammered, which is the result of kind of blue collar, heavy industry exercise. But the most complex thing is the rest of the integrations. But just to give you a comparison between Fincantieri and the Korean shipbuilder. A Korean shipbuilder is concentrated on repetitive ships. So the payload is very repetitive. The most important thing is to build a lot of hulls, all the same. If you consider a large commercial ship that is built in Korea, for example, a large ship can be in the region of $250 million, the largest. A large cruise ship can be 2 billion, 2 billion and a half. So it tells you a lot. What's the complexity of the payload? How much the complexity of the payload is totally changing the story. So if you compare, for example, Fincantieri with a large Korean shipyard, probably in terms of tons of steel, they hammer and they weld and they cut. This Korean shipyard can be the biggest in the world, but in terms of revenues, in terms of value added per ton of steel, we are as big as them. So that's the difference between Far East shipbuilding and Western shipbuilding. Western shipbuilding remains when the cost of the steel, the cost of the hull, and the cost of the labor is more or less 20% of the total cost. When the cost of the steel, the cost of the hull, the cost of the energy, the cost of the labor is 80% of the total technical cost, it went east. So, getting back to myself, I spent many years as CEO in managing the complexity of integrating many subsystems into a very complex system of systems. That's what we did for several years. So you learn how to transform engineering skills into results, how to blend engineering excellence into construction excellence. And when you do it with a fixed price, you have to be very disciplined in the project management, very disciplined in the contract management, very disciplined in the working capital management. So looks like an engineering job. In reality, it's an execution job. That's why building an LNG plant, building a refinery, and building a large ship has a lot in common, has more in common than what you think. So before doing this, I used to work in the shipping. I was before being in engineering and construction in oil and gas. So when I was young, quote unquote, I used to work in the shipping business because I was the general manager of a large Italian shipping company that was privatized under my tenure and was a shipping company managing ferries all over the country. You know, Italy is full of, I would say, coasts, and is full of islands. And so there was a large fleet managing the, the cabotage between the islands and the coast. So that's what I did in the past. So I could blend my knowledge of ships when I was younger with my experience in engineering and construction in oil and gas, and let me say, more or less 4 years ago, take the challenge of moving Fincantieri to the next challenges and successes.
I love how
I,
you illustrated the complexities of a cruise ship. But you mentioned shipbuilding, and of course, cruise ships are just one type of ship that Fincantieri builds. I would love for you to just outline the types of ships that Fincantieri builds, because for those who haven't studied the business in detail, it's a fascinating business. You briefly mentioned the defense aspect as well, and we'll explore that in further detail. But just introduce the types of vessels that Fincantieri is building, and do you think them as separate business lines, or is that just one integrated business in your view?
that's a very good point. So Fincantieri concentrated on what we call complex and technology-driven shipbuilding. So basically is cruise ships, because cruise is complex by definition, but also naval, so combatant ships, which are by definition driven by national procurement, no way to go east. And number three is offshore vessels for construction at sea. So whenever you need to build infrastructure at sea, either an oil and gas platform or a wind farm, or also laying cables on the seabed. So when you need a very complex technical ships, we are there with our competency. So the historical three complex shipbuilding are cruise, naval, and offshore construction ships. We used to build also commercial ships like tankers or container ship, but on that kind of repetitive shipbuilding, the market decided to go for the reason I was anticipating before. In geographies in which the cost of the steel, the cost of the labor, and the cost of the energy is the cheapest, given the relative weight of those three components over the 100% of the cost. So these three core businesses is where the complexity is, need to be mastered. And then on these three core businesses, we have two layers that are transversal, which is the uh, digital layer, and in general, I would say the electronics, automation systems. So let me call it a digital layer which is transversal to the three core businesses I was highlighting before. And the second layer is the electromechanical layer, meaning the engine room. So where we share value among the three core businesses is exactly in those two layers, in the layer of automation and digitalization and in the layer of electromechanical components, i.e. propulsion and engine room solutions. So this is very important because this gives and provides economy of scale and economy of scope. So when we deliver a digital solution for our ship, whatever is the platform, if it is a cruise platform, if it is a naval platform, or if it is a construction ship, offshore ship, anyway, if we are managing the automation layer, is the same. If we are creating a digital ecosystem on top of our automation system, is the same. For the propulsion, it is the same identical solution. So we build our own propellers, we build our own transmission systems, we build our own quote-unquote engine rooms. And these competencies are transversal. Either it is a white ship, a gray ship, or a warship. So a ship for construction at sea. So this is the recipe of Fincantieri to achieve economy of scale and economy of scope on complex shipbuilding, putting in common the automation digital layer and the propulsion system layer. So we are, in a sense, vertically integrated, more vertically integrated than what you think. So let me make an example. Fuel cells. So the big successor of the traditional combustion engine is the fuel cell. So we have our own competencies on combustion engines. We build combustion engines for certain ships for the Navy, but now we are transforming those competencies into our ability to integrate fuel cells that we are validating in submarines, for example, as air-independent propulsion kind of system, very crucial for submarines. But then once we validate this technology there, then we can export the use of the same fuel cell on cruise ship, for example, or on offshore vessels. You know what I mean? So when we put the hands into technical solution, we do it in a way that is by design applicable to the three legs of Fincantieri. But on top of these three core businesses, less than 1 year ago, we added a fourth leg, which is the leg of the underwater. Because we strongly believe that our experience in submarines, which is very, very rooted, because in our history we built something like 190 submarines in our history, beginning from the previous century. But this know-how in how to build submarine today is very key in itself for the conventional underwater, but is very key also for the new underwater, for the unconventional underwater. So we created a separated end division, a separated pole, where we put together our competencies in the traditional underwater, and we are developing from there our non-conventional competencies. So a couple of months ago, we put at sea our first unmanned underwater drones in association with our competencies in sonars, so in acoustic barriers, in association with our competencies on command and control systems. So we put together a solution that is already at sea, for protection of critical underwater infrastructure, which is a threat that has been heavily underestimated in the recent past. So we believe that this is the era of hybrid war. This is the era of asymmetric war. This is an era in which a sabotage of a telecom cable or on a pipeline or on whatever is laying on the seabed can create damages that are, as big as a traditional kinetic attack of a traditional weapon. So that's why we are so focused in the underwater domain, and we are already putting at sea solutions for critical infrastructure protection. So basically today, Fincantieri is mastering the conventional ships, but is also creating an increasing and progressive focus on the unconventional vessels that are drones, starting from the underwater drones and moving to the surface drones. So we are already validating unmanned surface drones like motorboats, totally unmanned, that can, interact with underwater drones and with the ship, with the mothership. So the mothership of the future, or better, the surface ship of the future, is no more a ship, it's a mothership. So it's a ship that has to take care and deploy surface drones, navigating on the surface, and underwater drones. So Fincantieri is increasingly, shifting its business model in order to procure that our conventional ships are mastering the new, I would say, attributes, the new ancillary, I would say, means and vessels and quote unquote objects that are needed for the naval warfare of the future.
I love this
I'll,
illustration of the mothership and the vessels that operate around it in the ecosystem. I know you've personally been championing the idea of Fincantieri being a systems integrator, and from what I hear from you, I gather that that's precisely the idea, right? That a single vessel no longer operates in isolation on the battlefield. There's a whole network of vessels that come together. Is that where your vision comes from, and is that a fair assessment of what you explained?
no, that's very, very important. That's very, very important. There are two school of thoughts, dear Mobeen. There is a school of thought according to which the future is all unmanned. So Ukraine is indicating an avenue, which is the avenue of basically going beyond the traditional ship and relying, I wouldn't say more and more, and in the medium long term, almost exclusively on unmanned vessels. So that's that. Let me say this is one school of thought. Then there is another school of thought that is thinking that you need conventional ships because you need to you know leverage what a ship represent in terms of deterrence, in terms of ability to launch, for example, cruise, I would say missiles. And you need the large ship because the large ship is a kind of footprint. Okay. My point is that, as usual in life, there are never two options. There are always three options. Always, always be doubtful when there are only two alternatives. The reality is the fusion of the two school of thoughts. But you know why? The reason is that it is not that the new threats are substituting the old threats, are simply adding on So you have to manage the old threats plus the new threats. So it's so important that you think of the ship of the future, which is the ship that is physical, large, to be deployed over the oceans, but at the same time, the ship has to be capable to deploy whatever the new technologies can enable, which are drones and which are, new kind of, I would say, doctrines. So the real school of thought is the combination of the two, whereby you have to have traditional ships that are motherships, that are enhancing their capabilities, that are enhancing their being of action by means of having best available technologies in terms of unmanned vessels, best available technologies in terms of ability to telecontrol or ability to, manage in a cooperative way a number of unmanned vessels that are enhancing the capability of the traditional ship. So it's a kind of superpower you are giving to the traditional ship, enhancing, for example, the area that the ship can patrol, that the patrol corvette can monitor. So you can deploy drones that can go for 10,000 miles themselves and be a projection of the patrol ship, enhancing his powers. But you need both. You need both.
I love the life lessons that there's always a third option, and I will always remember that. Thank you for that. But of course, you mentioned the topic of deterrence, and we're talking about naval applications. Very important and topical at a time when the topic of European defense has been talked about so much. Now, our interest from Wisdom Tree's perspective in Fincantieri developed when we started looking at the defense topic. Now, there's clearly a surge in demand from governments, particularly in Europe. How has that shifted or impacted Fincantieri's business? How do you see the developments in terms of geopolitical developments in this space, the broader trend of Europe looking to become more self sufficient in its own defense, and the rising importance of Europe's own defense companies, and indeed Fincantieri's role in this ecosystem? How has that impacted your business, and how do you see the broader trend here?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. Let me say Europe has clearly clarified a new industrial cycle for our geopolitical bloc. So our geopolitical bloc has very clear in mind that we need to progressively be self-sufficient. So we need to protect ourselves in the short term, and in the long term, we need to understand which are the capacity gaps, and we need to fill those capacity gaps. So we need to protect ourselves in the short term with what is already on the market, but we need at the same time to create a roadmap filling the gap of what Europe is not still capable to produce internally, autonomously. So that's the clear vision of of Europe. So there is a clear understanding of the gap, which is a capacity gap, meaning we need to to build more, we need to produce more, but it is not only a capacity gap, it's also a technological gap. So we need to be self-sufficient, we need to be autonomous in terms of also European technologies. So that's the roadmap of Europe. in safe respect, there are, I would say, two different instruments that Europe is putting at disposal of the different nations. The first and very popular now is what is called SAFE, which is a facility for 150 billion to be allocated as, I would say, facility, so it's money to be reimbursed, but at very, very, very attractive conditions and with very, 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 very long time horizons. So this SAFE is the testament of European intention to push nations to spend more today while we speak, because those money will need to be spent within 2030, which is the first condition. The second condition is that at least two nations will have to collaborate on that specific armament system, which means that Europe not only is pushing for expenditure, but is pushing also for defragmentation, which is the big weakness of Europe. We have too many platforms. We need to go for defragmentation of key platforms. Defining platform, a tank, a ship, a drone, so all the typical items of a defense system. So expenditure in fast track expenditure, first condition. Second condition, defragmentation. Third condition is European content. So you can have access to this facility if at least the 65% of the content is European. So this is what Europe is doing in order to increase the capacity. So the gap in terms of capacity. And then there is a gap in terms of technology. So there is a technological gap on strategic and technological autonomy of the continent. In this second respect, there is another program that is called EDIP, which is being launched, which is a grant. It's not a facility. It's not a financial facility. It is a grant in order to accelerate and fill the technological gap. The technological gap, is the top layer of the defense systems. I am saying that the ship is no more a ship, it's a system of systems, but then this ship is in a system of systems, which is the way you have to orchestrate on a multi-domain, from a multi-domain perspective, starting from the observation, navigation, and communication at satellite level, all the way through the kind of multi-domain, huge command and control system. This is where Europe is not self-sufficient. And there will be money allocated to this, let me say, super command and control layer through EDIP. So let me tell you more about how all this system is impacting Fincantieri expectations for the future. So let me say there are three circles, one into the other. The first circle is what we are doing with our Navy. The Italian Navy is the fourth Navy at NATO level. We are after UK and France simply because we don't have access to nuclear, not because our Navy is not extended enough or experienced enough. So our Navy has a very well-proven fleet at sea. There are many platforms already validated, and there is a big program of accelerating also the capacity for the Italian Navy. So we have a clear understanding of what the Navy is going to demand in terms of destroyers, additional frigates, corvettes, submarines. So the acceleration in this respect is the first, I would say, consequence of Fincantieri of the current geopolitical situation. This is the first circle. The second circle, one into the other, is the European defense. So Fincantieri is very active in this safe program, enhancing the collaboration with other nations and with other navies in order to, I would say, implement and employ those financial measures, those large available money on the table. And this is the second big opportunity for Fincantieri. And then there is a third circle, which is the extra-European export. Obviously, when you sell defense, you don't sell a product, full stop. So it is not all about pricing. It is not all about the quality of the product itself. When you sell defense, you sell a kind of geopolitical alliance with other geopolitical blocks. So that's why we are very active in blocks in which Italy and Europe, but Italy in particular, enjoys good geopolitical relationships. The natural market for Southern European people is Middle East. So we are very active today while we speak in Middle East. We have a joint venture with Abu Dhabi, which is useful also to go through Abu Dhabi in the direction of the geopolitical platform of Emirates, which means sub-Saharan Africa, countries like Mauritania, for example, or Angola, that are not typically accessible to Italy, but are much more accessible through the joint venture we have in Abu Dhabi, which work as a door for markets in which the financial platform of Emirates can be very helpful. It can enable, again, geopolitical business more and more. Then we are in Saudi. Saudi is expected to become the fourth spender in the world in defense. They have a very large and ambitious program for the fleet on the two very important seas, the Arabic Sea and the Red Sea. And so it's another place to be where Italy enjoys very good geopolitical relationships. Then obviously we are in North Africa, we are already in Egypt, we are in other Middle East countries such as Qatar. So that's the first, I would say, extra-European export we are looking at. And the second one is Southeast Asia. So according to our business plan, the other, I would call overrated quadrant, geopolitical quadrant, is Southeast Asia. We wanted to put a very important commercial flag there, and we did it in Indonesia 1 year ago. Indonesia is very emblematic of Southeast Asia because it's a country of 250 million Muslim people living on 17,000 islands in front of China. But the same is Malaysia, where we are very active. The same is Philippines. The same is Thailand. The same is Vietnam. All countries in which there is, there is the perception of an overheated situation due to the China issue, which is pending and clearly in front of everyone. So this is the ambition of Fincantieri, to go through these three concentric circles I just described. We have highlighted a huge addressable market. Again, it's not opportunistic commercial business, it's a geopolitical business. It gets along with the Italian and European geopolitical platform, but it's a big thing. We have identified 20 billion of opportunities in the next couple of years to be addressed by Fincantieri. There are many campaigns, commercial campaigns going on. Obviously, it's public administration procurement. So the process of even if there is this sense of urgency, but nevertheless, the process of award, it's a process of award that goes through stages and gates. But we are on top of many opportunities, and we are, in general, very optimistic about the prospects we have in front.
It's fascinating how you talk about the addressable market and so many countries and geographies that you are looking to serve. One question that we always get from our clients when we talk about this strong surge in demand from governments around the world for the things that European defense companies are manufacturing is, will they be able to meet that urgency? Like, of course, you can't just build a ship overnight, you can't build a submarine overnight, and but there's a lot of demand, and there's a sense of urgency for that demand to be fulfilled as well. We were speaking to Rheinmetall a few months ago on this show, and they talked about repurposing industrial capacity in other industries, like utilizing Volkswagen factories to make defense related equipment. And that was an interesting example of how things can be repurposed when the need is there. I know Fincantieri has been realigning to some extent its business as well to meet that higher level of demand, particularly from the defense sector. Do you see that as a fair assessment? And how do you see Fincantieri managing expectations and indeed managing that strong pipeline for meeting that addressable market, but also making sure that you're managing expectations, but also looking to meet that sense of urgency that is certainly out there in the defense sector right now?
Thank you also for this question, because it's a good occasion to explain why we believe that Fincantieri is very well positioned. You know why? Because we are very fortunate, because we don't manage the naval defense business alone. With a production system which is made of different shipyards that can somehow move themselves, accommodating a market demands with a level of versatility and adaptability that is due to our dual nature. So the fact that Fincantieri is naval and civilian, and the fact that Fincantieri is a system of 18 shipyards, helps us in allocating the capacity and reallocating the construction capacity in a very fast track and unique way. So I'll be more precise. For example, Italy. In Italy, we have 8 shipyards. We have the shipyards of the north that are on the northwest, dedicated to naval, on the northeast, dedicated to cruise. And then we have the shipyards of the south that are hybrid. So they can build a portion of ships that you need either for civilian or for naval ships. So what we are doing now, it is, since the defense is growing a lot, the defense business is growing a lot, we are allocating the hybrid shipyards in favor of defense. And we can do it tomorrow morning. So we don't need to buy a shipyard. We don't need to take the concessions. We don't need to take the authorization to work for the defense, which is a very lengthy process. It's an hybrid shipyard that we can allocate 100% to defense, and as a result, give a kind of, I would say, strong push and increasing the capacity. So we are thinking of a new industrial plan according to which we can double the capacity in defense, and half of this enhancement we can do at parity of infrastructure, simply allocating more hybrid capacity to defense. Because then what we can do, we can move what we do in the Italian hybrid shipyard to Romania. In Romania, we have two large shipyards that we can optimize a lot in order to procure that with the same infrastructure, we can increase productivity. So we have a reserve of value for report in our Romanian shipyard. So we can procure that what we don't do anymore in the southern hybrid shipyard for cruise, we can move it. Again, it's portion of the ship, because the ships will be outfitted for cruise in Northeast, in the shipyards of Northeast. But this, let me say, production of steel sections and portions will be moved from the shipyard of the south to Romania. And this will allow to increase a lot our naval construction capacity in the shipyard of the south. You know what I mean? So Fincantieri is very fortunate because we can heavily increase the production capacity for defense at parity of the existing infrastructure, simply reallocating and reorganizing our throughput capacity in different shipyards. So we have a system of shipyards that can, in a sense, breathe along with the business and be fast track. Then obviously, we are planning other infrastructure expansions, which can do the second part of the story. So to increase the naval capacity, expanding the infrastructure. But this is something we can do later, and during the lead times of this expansion of infrastructure, we can nevertheless fast track, increase the capacity for defense. So that's why I'm saying we are fortunate, because being a large shipbuilder, having the prerogative of managing a system of shipyards, we can play on this internal allocation in a way that can be truly distinctive vis-a-vis any other competitor, which is accustomed to manage a single shipyard, which is fixed by nature.
One topic, Pierroberto, you've mentioned a few times in our conversation is the importance of technology, and you've talked about autonomous systems, you've talked about connected systems, different types of propulsion. I'm curious, what are the technological innovations you are most excited about as a business, particularly like people look at the advancements in AI and how they affect different industries. We know they certainly affect the defense industry, the shipbuilding industry, and you've already talked about autonomous systems there. I'm curious to get your take on how you see AI and indeed other technologies and technological innovations affecting your business, and what's the way that Fincantieri navigates technological trends.
No, thank you very much, because it is exactly along the lines of our, I would say, business setup and innovation setup. So I repeat once again that I believe that there are two key components of any vessel, which is the propulsion system and the automation system. And we are so, I would say, obsessed by this that we have our internal proprietary solutions on those two layers. So the future of technology for us is again along the lines of those two domains, the domain of the automation and the domain of the propulsion. And we are projecting in the future our leadership exactly on those two domains. So the ship of the future will have to have certain endurance meaning propulsion system, and has to be certain level of automation all the way to robotization. At the end of the day, a drone, it's a robot. It's a navigating robot. So it's the evolution of the automation to the maximum extent, becoming autonomous through artificial intelligence. And let me say that those two trends are very evident in the underwater domain. Why? Because in the underwater domain, you need specific propulsion systems, because those drones need to be also not only having enough endurance, so many miles to accomplish their missions, but they have to be also as silent as possible, as stealth as possible. So, for example, we are investing in electric motors. And we are investing, as I was anticipating before, on the propulsion system, on the electric propulsion system of the future. So that will be a very key and crucial component. But again, it is still not pure technology. Let me move from the propulsion to the automation. What we are doing on the automation. The automation in the underwater is, again, very critical. Why? Because while a flying drone can be telecontrolled, it's a matter of protecting the link, because the link shouldn't be jammable. Because if the link of a flying drone is jammable, there's no way, there is no story. But when you are underwater, it is by definition not telecontrollable. It is by definition not controllable from far. Simply because under the water, there is no way to communicate, because there is no Wi-Fi, there is no GPS. The existing communications are all optic and acoustic. But by definition, you don't have the bandwidth to telecontrol drones. So what I'm saying is that the underwater will de facto immensely accelerate the adoption of artificial intelligence, because the underwater drones will be are born autonomous, because they have to fulfill their mission in full autonomy, because there is no way to control them in a different manner. You know, there is the possibility to guide torpedoes with fiber optic. That's what we do for torpedoes, for example. But again, this is specific to torpedoes. You launch certain torpedoes so you can control them with a very, very, very invisible, small fiber optic cable. Well, when it comes to drones, they have to be autonomous, really autonomous. So we are pushing a lot on this kind of underwater drones with AI, in order to procure that they can perform their mission, then they can get back, download on a docking station, for example, on the seabed, and recharge themselves, or being recovered from the sea and download the results of the mission and upload recharge and upload a new mission. So those are the systems that we are putting at sea in these days. And again, the fact that there is a conventional company that is taking care of these unconventional means and instruments, it's an immense source of value. Why? Because it is not about technology. It's about having a solution. So when there are new technologies, the biggest mistake is to think of the technology. But the Navy is not buying a technology. The Navy is buying a solution. So the integration of the technology inside the ship is the prerequisite for a solution. So the fact that the conventional captain is taking care of the unconventional drones, it's a guarantee of success because these new technological objects and vessels will be integrated by design because that's what we do for living. So it is unthinkable that this object to be deployed from a ship will not work. So if you look at the many startups all over the world in this respect, all are suffering from a lack of integration because everyone is looking at one technology, but very few are thinking of how to orchestrate these new technologies in a way that is plug and play with the mothership, with the traditional electronics, with the existing combat management systems, with the existing ship management system. So I'm very proud of what we are doing because we are mastering the new frontiers. We are pioneering the new doctrines of the naval drones, but we're doing it inside a company that is guaranteeing that those new technologies will be working from day one. So I don't know if you are familiar with domotic at all. Huh? I'm familiar with
Would love to
domotica,
hear.
but you put domotic at home, it never works. Never, never. So we are procuring that these new technologies will be embedded in the conventional ships, and therefore the guarantee for a plug and play effect.
We've covered a lot of ground here in this conversation and learned so much about Fincantieri. I would love to get a closing remark, Pierroberto, on as you look ahead, what excites you about Fincantieri's business? Maybe you get your closing thoughts on that.
You know, we have two very, I would say, strong points. One point is that we have long-term visibility in our shipyard. So basically, we have something like 60 billion euro of workloads already secured, which means that for the next 10 years, we know exactly what to do in our shipyards with a very high degree of visibility, which means that we don't need to, shipbuilder typically has this obsession of having workloads. So we have 10 years already secured. So we can work on two very important levels. One is execution. And when you have visibility in a business like ours, it means that you can manage the procurement in a certain way. Because it is not that you are managing the supply chain in an opportunistic way, but you can manage your key vendors, giving them visibility in long term, and so securing super optimistic economic conditions. The same is with subcontractors. It is not that you have to be opportunistic with your subcontractors. Your subcontractor can get along with you. I'm not giving you one ship. I will give you 10 ships. So you can stabilize your workforce. You can work on the training. You can work on all the key components for a smooth execution. So visibility is very good because it is guaranteeing very well good and smooth execution. But then we can work on innovation at the same time. So we know that on our traditional business, we are fully fledged, and we can therefore nurture aside innovation, for example, in the underwater domain. So I'm very, 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 I would say, eager to present our new business plan, which will be presented in terms of highlights in the next, we took the commitment of presenting it within year end. It will be presented in form of highlights, obviously, but I will be even more interested in presenting the detailed business plan in a capital market day that will be held within the first quarter, where we can disclose how much this visibility we have in terms of workload can enhance our economic and financial performance, and at the same time, how we can develop Fincantieri in its adjacencies, and which are the ideas we have on the ships of the future, on the propulsion system of the future, on the automation and digital systems of the future, and in the underwater, which will be a huge enabler of all these new technologies.
Well, it's clear to us that the future of shipbuilding is being built right now, and indeed, Fincantieri is playing a central role in that journey. We thank you, Pierroberto, for your insights. We've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from this insightful discussion. Before we close, I do need to state the following. To clarify, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and in this episode, Fincantieri, and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. With that, we thank you, Mr. Pierroberto, for joining us today and sharing your insights about Fincantieri. And we thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of The Next Big Thing. And of course, if you want to learn more about the technologies, the megatrends changing our world, visit Wisdom Tree in Europe's website, or indeed follow us on LinkedIn or X, where you can find out more information.
Thank you, Mobeen, for your time, and congratulations for this format, which is very fresh, very interesting, and I enjoyed very much. Thank you indeed.
It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.